am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Brannon Poe, the founder of Poe Group Advisors, who has been facilitating successful accounting practice transitions throughout the US and Canada since 2003. Brannon is the creator of the Accounting Practice Academy, an online workshop for practice management. He also hosts the Accountant's Flight Plan podcast with other top thought leaders in the accounting profession. Brannon is an E&Y alumni. He has authored multiple books, including Accountant's Flight Plan, Best Practices for Today's Firms, and On Your Own, How to Start Your Own CPA Firm. He is passionate about entrepreneurship and is the president-elect of Entrepreneurs Organization Charleston. During my interview with Brannon, we discussed how he took a different path from his parents so that he could create a more stable life for his future family. He shares the lessons he has learned along the way on getting the right experience to grow a business and to eventually transition it when you are ready. Hi, I'm Amy Vetter. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm with Brannon Poe from Poe Group Advisors. And Brannon, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Sure. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I've operated as a business broker in the accounting space since 2003. And we're just now this year rolling out a virtual workshop called Accounting Practice Academy.
Great. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So how did you get started in what you do today?
Well, it's funny. Let me go way back.
Okay.
When I decided to be a CPA, which I decided when I was in high school, and I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My vision of a successful career was to have multiple businesses and kind of be doing a little bit each day with different stuff. And my parents were both school teachers. Actually, they were art teachers. And so
really?
I had no business background whatsoever. And I decided I did not want to be a starving artist. So I met with this entrepreneur one day when I was, I think, a junior in high school. And I said, I really just want to learn about business. Like, how do you learn this stuff? People aren't born knowing how to do this, right?
Right.
So he said, well, why don't you go and become a CPA? You see, you'll get to see how other business owners are running their businesses and you'll learn. So I said, okay, well, that makes sense. So that's what I did.
So before you move forward, I want to back up a little bit into your parents, because that's a very different background. So were they artists? Did they do their own art besides teaching?
Yeah, actually, my mom is 80 years old and still does her own art. She owns a pottery studio now. But yeah, my dad was a abstract artist and a photographer, and he's was a college professor. He's retired now. And my mom, she lived this sort of typical artistic life. She traveled for 3 or 4 years when she was in her 20s and lived all over the world. She's been to she traveled really in an interesting way on the cheap and worked places, and she had this very adventurous life. And for that time period that your mom was doing that, how did she have that generationally? Like, were her parents like that, or how did she have the freedom as a woman traveling on her own like that? I mean, that's pretty unique in that time period. Yeah, my mom, gosh, I don't know. My grandfather was pretty adventurous guy.
Okay.
And like my grandfather was hyperactive when he was a kid. And instead of like forcing him to go through school,
my great grandmother just decided to homeschool him
Oh, wow.
until he was about the 5th grade, when he calmed down a little bit and could focus.
Huh.
So he had a lot of energy and just, and he ended up fine. But
Right.
so they were always, I guess my family had always sort of just figured out their own path.
They were free spirits. Yeah.
Free spirits, yeah.
So then you watched them kind of in the world they were in, and did you see them struggle? Is that like, what was the struggle they were having?
Well, they struggled financially. So
Yeah.
my grandfather, my parental grandfather, was a business owner and did pretty well for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very much of the belief that, you're on your own, kid, as far as my father was concerned. And so my parents struggled because, teaching is not the most profitable profession.
Right.
So
who were you looking at? Like, so there had to have been some comparison, right? Like, you're seeing your parents struggle. They're living their passion, obviously. Right. Were there other kids you were looking at, or other parents that you were like, I wish my home life was more like this, or what you were striving to be for yourself? Like, how would you take yourself out of that mindset from your parents?
It's an interesting question. I never really totally thought about it, but looking back, my grandfather on my father's side was a big influence on me when I was a kid. And he had a successful career, and, he was a partner in a pretty successful business. Mm-hmm. And one thing he used to do when I was a kid was he would literally show me his mutual fund reports. so he wanted to impart upon me the importance of saving and how money grows over time. And so I guess I always looked to him as a role model. And so that was probably one of the things, is like, I want a comfortable life like my grandfather has, because he and my grandmother traveled a lot, and they just, they had a lot of things and abilities to do stuff that my parents couldn't do. They always had nice cars. They had a good lifestyle. Yeah.
So then in your head, you're kind of looking at that, seeing that comparison, and then you're seeking mentors, obviously, and find this entrepreneur that kind of guides you as to the CPA profession. So what was your next step from there?
Yeah. Well, so I went to school, learned how to, study to be an accountant, got out of school, went to work for Ernst & Young in the audit department, and immediately knew this is not for me.
Why was that?
It was monotonous, and it was detail oriented. And I just, when I was in school, I really enjoyed learning the concepts. But when I was in practice and I had to grind it out, just not for me. And I knew it pretty early on. And plus the hours back then. So I started at E&Y in 92. And back then, probably like your experience, you were expected to work whatever hours they expected of you.
Right.
And at the time where I was, 80 to 90 hours a week was pretty standard.
Right.
And even into the summer, I didn't get any relief because I was put on a summer audit out of town. And so I was traveling, and we were working literally 7 days a week on that summer audit. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah.
So how did you move out of that, or decide that you were not going to do that anymore?
Well, I had interviewed on campus with Elliott Davis and Company, which was a pretty large firm in South Carolina. They're pretty regionally known now. And I always liked them, and they had more variety of work. They had, if you went to work for them, you could do tax, you could do audit, you could do some, you could get closer with the small business clients. Right. Which, remember, back my original goal was to learn how business operated.
Right.
I wasn't learning anything by auditing large public companies.
Right.
I mean, I was learning how to audit cash, but that wasn't really, that didn't apply to how do I run 4 or 5 different companies, small companies. And I thought, well, if I go to Elliott, I'll get more exposure to the small business side. And that was what I did.
Yeah.
So, and they were a much more, in terms of the schedule, was a little bit more sane. We only worked 6 days a week instead of 7. And so it was a good decision.
Yeah. So then how long were you at Elliott, and what kind of work were you doing there?
So I was at Elliott 3-4 years, and I got, I felt like that was a good baseline of experience. I did a little bit of everything. We did some audit work, but that was pretty limited. Most of what I did was tax. I learned how to do payroll tax returns. I learned pretty much everything involved with a small business.
Okay.
And that was what I wanted to do. And I actually got more exposure to small business entrepreneurs. And it was fun. I remember I had this client that owned a lot of Pizza Huts. He owned a lot of different franchises. And this guy had been an orphan.
Oh, wow.
Had become a multimillionaire and started with literally nothing. And I remember he took a whole afternoon when I was on his job and just talked to me. And, it was just, no one had ever done that before. And I realized, that.
And why would he do that?
I don't know. I can't remember. This was a long time ago, but
yeah.
I think he saw something in me.
Right.
And he sort of talked me out of being in public accounting.
Yeah.
He sort of talked me into that. He didn't feel like he felt like I was capable of branching out and probably would be happier if I did so.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember that conversation very vividly, that was sort of the point where I decided that I didn't want to stay in public practice.
Right. So then what did you do?
Well, it took a while to figure it out, but I decided that I really wanted to do some kind of sales work, because I felt like I wanted to be rewarded directly based on what I was doing.
Right.
Like, I didn't want some subjective, I didn't want to be an employee, basically.
Right.
So sales was kind of that first step of becoming your own boss, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, gosh, I can, how can I do that? How can I jump from CPA profession into sales? And then a friend of mine called me, and he and his dad operated a plumbing distribution company. Kind of, I don't know if you have Ferguson where you are. They're a pretty national chain.
Okay.
But it was a company that sold like bathtubs and plumbing pipes, pipe fittings. Yeah. And so his father had started the business, and my friend Sean that I went to high school with was gone into the business, and they needed, basically just needed a bookkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, you don't really need to hire a CPA if you just need a bookkeeper. And he said, no, we want you to be more involved in that. And so I talked to the father, his name is Johnny, and I said, I really want to get into sales. Will you put me into sales? I can do the books for 15, 20 hours a week. And then you let me go out and call on customers. And so he had known me since the 8th grade. So he said, sure, I'll teach you how to go out and call on. And I was calling on plumbers and contractors.
Yeah.
Kind of a rough mix of folks. And I figured if I could sell to these people, I could learn. And it happened to be that Johnny was, the dad was a very good salesperson. Like, he was just an extraordinary salesperson, and never had any formal training, but just knew how to do it. And he gave me a lot of guidance when I was coming up in that business.
Well, and it's an interesting kind of point as well, that sometimes a career is not this direct line. Like, you have to go sideways in order to go up.
Yeah.
That, like, you recognize you had a gap in your skill set, which is really important, because I don't think a lot of people, spend enough time getting sales training.
Mm-hmm.
Like we go to school for what we're good at. We have that expertise, but typically no matter what your path is, to have that sales understanding helps you in no matter what you're doing.
Yep.
And when you're lacking it, it can get in your way, even if you're the smartest person in the room.
Right. And sales is something I think it takes a lot of practice, and you have to just do a lot of it to get good at it.
Yeah. So how long were you there doing that?
I was there for another 3-4 years, and I was actually partner in the business. And then we started another company that was a spinoff company, and I was a partner in that business. And then we looked to sell that company, and that was my first exposure to selling a company, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't that strange how you end up where you are?
Yeah.
So what did you do? So you went through that process, and then you're like, I want to do this more.
Well, I liked it. It didn't hit me until later that I wanted to do it more, and it hit me by accident. So I actually went and started a CPA firm, and it took me a lot longer to get it off the ground than I had ever anticipated, because I was living in a small town. I was living in Greenwood, South Carolina.
Right.
So it wasn't, there wasn't a vibrant business community there.
Right.
That was growing and so I decided, that was when I moved to Charleston. So I moved to Charleston in the year 2000, and I went to work as a controller for a waste management company. And it was sort of, I was in a temporary spot. When I left the plumbing company, there were some things going on that was, the father was an alcoholic. Johnny was an alcoholic, and he was, I don't know, he was it wasn't a pleasant workplace environment. Right. So when I left there, I sort of left, it's not one of those situations where you can really plot and plan. It was sort of kind of blew up a little bit.
Right.
So I was reeling a little bit at that point. I was 30 years old. And so I moved to Charleston, loved it here, had a kind of a stable, steady career for a few years. And then I wanted to do something else, and I wanted to have a business for myself. So I thought, well, maybe I'll buy a CPA firm. And I reached out to, it's funny, I went to CPE with a friend of mine who's a CPA in Columbia, South Carolina. And he said, there's this guy that brokers CPA firms. All he does is sell CPA firms. You should call him and see if there's a firm for sale in Charleston. And I said, huh. And so we were shooting pool and drinking beer, and I forgot the guy's name. I got back to Charleston, and I said, what was that guy's name? I couldn't remember. And I Googled the wrong guy. And I Googled the founder of Accounting Practice Sales in Dallas, Howard Holmes, and Howard wrote me back, and he said, I don't have anybody in South Carolina. Do you want to sell CPA firms?
Oh.
And I said, huh.
Oh my God, what a chance.
Yeah, I said, huh, maybe I do. So, I just got on a plane, and I went down to Dallas and talked with him.
Wow.
And he signed me up that day. And he said, you can start this on the side if you want. And so I did. I did it. I would get up really early in the morning. I'd go make phone calls I'd sit in my car that was parked by the river and make calls and do emails at night. So I was working crazy hours for a couple of years, but it got the business off the ground.
Well, and it's an important thing for people to understand about going into business too. It's not glamorous.
No.
It seems like it's glamorous to have your own business, but really it's that grind, right? Like you're trying to make something of nothing. So that means it's on the phone. It's all the work that you weren't doing before, someone else was doing.
But honestly, it did not feel like a grind.
Right.
It felt like the work just kind of did it. I mean, not that it did itself, because I was obviously working.
Right.
But there was something.
You enjoyed it.
There was something really not only do I enjoy it, I knew something was there. Like I knew
Yeah.
it wasn't like, it's so different than having someone ask you to do something and you're doing it for them and you don't even
Right.
realize, you're not sure if it's even should be
Important.
done.
Yeah.
Is this really important, But
Yeah.
when you're doing it for yourself, there is definitely a different feeling around the work.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did you learn through that time period that might have been surprising for you about yourself? Where you might have, it took you a long time to get to your dream of owning a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was it different than what you thought it was going to be when you were a junior in high school?
Well, it was definitely different than I thought, but no, I think when you start a business and all of the things that you've learned along the way that you haven't even taken note of kind of come alive when you start a business. Because a business just is so, running one on your own for the first time is so challenging that that's when you learn what you learn what you're made of and what you've learned along the way. I also learned that I was pretty good at sales. Like I had sold kind of more of a commodity product, but I never really sold a service like this. And I learned I was probably better at selling a service than I was a product, because when you're competing with a product, it's hard to differentiate. It's a lot easier to differentiate a service.
And in what way?
Well, a product is a product, right? Like, if I'm selling bathtubs, anybody, they can get that same bathtub somewhere else. Now, I might be able to be a better salesperson and they might like me more, but there's definitely more price pressure. When you're selling a service, you are the product. You are the product and the salesperson all at once. So I think that's the difference.
Yeah. So now you've been in business for how long doing this?
16 years.
16 years. So when was the tipping point with the business when it started really getting off the ground and you're like, okay, this is like what I saw with my grandfather?
Yeah. So I actually, I was actually very successful pretty rapidly. So I started in December of 2003, and by May, I had signed 10 listings.
Oh, wow.
And so I just had a knack for it. I just realized, like, I think I found something here for me. For me, that was good for me. And, by the summer, I was starting, because it takes a while to close transactions. So I started in December. I don't think I got any income until April or May. So that was a 5-month lag. And then July, I closed a pretty large transaction in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then I knew, okay, I think maybe I can break away from the job and quit the job. And so that summer I went to the owner, who I'm still very good friends with, and told him, hey, I've kind of started this thing on the side. I want to focus on it full time. However, I'm not quite ready to break away full time. How would you feel about me just working 20 hours a week until you can get another controller in here? And then I can focus on this more, but not full time yet. And he agreed. So,
nice.
It helped him out. And I helped find my replacement. And then I worked another 6 months and till I would go full time with it. Because I wanted to, I actually had 3 small children at the time too when I started the business. So I had a 6-7-year-old. Anyway, my kids were all under the age of 7, and my wife was not working, so it was
huge
a lot of responsibility.
Well, and you had to have a belief in yourself, in order to do it. And I think still, even though it's not art, I mean, it's a risky choice to make where your family was kind of empowered to make those choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's
So,
risky, and
yeah.
no, I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say it especially risky because it's not a recurring revenue stream. I think you and I talked
Right.
about that when you were here last week. Like it's you sell a business and your client is gone.
Hmm. So you have to know you have enough in the pipeline.
Right.
Yeah. So from all of the businesses that have kind of come through your business, what are some things that you see with leaders of those businesses or people that are selling businesses or buying businesses where you might notice some belief systems in them right away and you're like, this may be a problem. Like immediately you can kind of catch where someone's going to get in their own way in a sales process?
Well, I think definitely if you're talking about a seller, there are a lot of ways they can get in their way. Are you talking about how they run their business or
just who they are, I mean, they could be how they run their business or just how they believe, about their business versus what the
okay.
actual value is or,
Right.
that sort of thing. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is they believe it can't run without them. They can't envision how it runs without them. That can be a little bit of a problem because then the question in my mind is, one, are they truly ready to exit?
Right.
And the second is, are they going to try to micromanage the buyer?
Right.
Because if they try to micromanage the buyer, then you're going to have operational issues. You're going to have problems with the clients moving over and the staff moving over. So it's very important when somebody sells that they're truly ready to let go.
Yeah. So how do you give them advice to do that?
The best advice is what's pulling you out of the practice? Like, I think when you want to go to something else, you need to have something pulling you there. Like you don't need to just try to escape where you are. So if you're unhappy with your business, because that happens a lot, I'll talk with sellers who are they're burned out or very unhappy with their practice, and they think selling is going to solve their problem. But what they realize is they don't have anything to go to.
Right.
And that might not really hit them square in the eyes until they've got an offer on the table.
Right.
Or even if they've accepted an offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't think they're ready, sometimes I've said, I don't think you're ready.
Right.
And just see what their reaction is.
Mm-hmm.
But what they can do is plan that next chapter. That's really important. So, okay, you want to leave. Well, what are you going to do? Do you have another opportunity that's pulling you out? Do you want to travel? Are you moving away? Like, what's causing this transition? Because selling a business is a huge transition in life.
Yes.
If it's your main business.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think it's so much more too of like, it's how you view yourself, right? Like it's your, like I remember my business when I sold it, I was depressed for like a couple of weeks. I kept forcing myself to get out and run and, something that was a good thing for it to happen, but it's like your right arm, like you remember those days you're out in the car, making all those sales, starting up the business, all the people that have gone through, the clients, the staff, that you've affected their families, whatever. And it's just like done.
Yeah,
and it's and then you're kind of, you have to be good at like, how am I going to reassess who I am now, even if it means retirement, but you've got to relook at who you are and what kind of things you'd be open to doing rather than trying to hold on to something that's over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think it is easier if something's pulling you out.
Yeah.
The easiest ones for me is when someone says, I've got this other business and it's just booming and it's far superior to my CPA practice. And I want to sell my CPA firm so I can go do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any trouble. Those people are very reasonable with every decision involved.
Well, and I think it's an important just human component of transition is to know where you're going when you're leaving one thing behind.
Right.
Whether it's another business or whether it's quality of life or whatever it is, that you have a vision of what that is so that you can let something else go and let it live on its own.
Yeah.
Without feeling like you're letting go of yourself by doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So from the things that you've learned over your journey and how many people kind of have given you advice along the way, how do you help others that work for you or with you on some of the lessons you've learned as well?
Well, as far as helping others, I think the best thing you can do is ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
Questions are way more powerful than pretty much any kind of advice, if you will.
Right.
Most people that I work with, I mean, I try to hire people who are kind of entrepreneurial by nature.
Mm-hmm.
And those people don't like to be told what to do to start with. So what I've learned is if you ask questions, then you can determine if you can help them or not anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't even know what they want or what their issues are, how could I help them? So if you ask the right questions, that gets them thinking. And if you know something about what they're doing, or if you have some experience with what they're trying to do, then you share it, but it's on them, right? It's
right.
People. I'm a big believer that people are responsible for their own path. And if I can help them, I'm happy to help them, but it's on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the other side of things that you do, so I got involved with you because of EO Charleston.
Yeah.
That's kind of a startup thing as well. So what got you interested in doing that? And also I think it's helping to give you a bigger vision of what you can do in the future too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. EO it's a fun, chaotic organization. It stands for Entrepreneurs Organization. And just a little background, there are 14,000 members worldwide. And when my nest emptied, when the kids, the last one went off to college, I got bored. I was like, man.
Kind of like what we were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
What's your next thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my wife says, why don't you, what about hobbies? What about volunteering for something or another? And I just couldn't put my finger on what I wanted to do. And I said, most of my good friends are business owners.
Right.
And those are the people that I really just enjoy being with. So I want more of that in my life. How do I do that? And so I'd heard about EO from another business owner that I knew in Texas. And they didn't have a chapter in Charleston. So I decided to contact EO and see what it would take to start a chapter. And they had really wanted to get one going here. And that was about 2 years ago. And we just our chapter officially launched in this past summer.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing to just highlight that a hobby, like you can look at that as like more work, but it's what fills you, right? That you get excited to do, where you can release from your other work, from your day. It doesn't mean you're overworking just because you choose to do something that is business focused. If that's what you enjoy, if art's not in your, it's in your blood, but not, something that excites you like it did your parents, doesn't mean, you can be doing other things that expand your mind and get you excited. That's what's important.
Right. And I need those other things too. Like, I think if it was all business and EO, I'd probably get, get overtaxed. And so I'm pretty good about time off, and I like to travel. I feel like travel is one of the ways that really gets me in a place where I'm not thinking about work, and I'm thinking about the moment. That's where I can be the most present, is when I'm in a new place.
Yeah. And it's important too, when you're leading a team, that if you're not taking time off, then they're going to, you can say to take time off, but if they're not seeing you enjoy your time off, and entrepreneurs are the worst about taking time off, because you might be taking
Yeah.
time off and taking phone calls and emails the whole time. So,
Yeah.
how you really show the example is important, so that people enjoy working for you as a business owner too.
Well, and we actually tell people, you take vacation the same way I do. And the way
Yeah.
I take it is I literally don't take my cell phone with me. I don't take a computer or a cell phone. And
That's awesome.
and so when I go, I'm totally unplugged. And that's what I expect my team to do as well, because there's value in going on vacation and not working. There's a tremendous amount of value to the business, because those people will come back. Two things: they'll come back rejuvenated, and who else is going to offer them that? Who else is going to say, do not work when you're away?
Yeah.
Like, I do not want you working when you're on vacation. So leave the phone here. And then if they email me or text me, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you
Right.
why are you contacting the office?
We got this. We have your back.
Yeah. So I think it just it creates a lot of longevity. Like, my people where are they going to find that? So it makes them sticky, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, great. So we're going to end with just some rapid fire questions, and you're going to pick a category, which is family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Money.
Okay. You are an entrepreneur through and through, right? All right. Things or actions that I don't have that I want.
A little more space in my schedule.
Okay.
I have a lot, and my EO buddies give me a hard time because I have a whole lot of that. But what I find is that the more I get my schedule right, the more the money comes in. It's counterintuitive.
You're in a better place, better mindset.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So things or actions that I do have that I want with money.
Oh, well, I get to travel. I get to travel. I go to really cool places, and I don't worry about money when I'm traveling. I stay in really nice, I like hotels that are really nice.
Yeah.
So that's what I spend my money on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want with money.
Don't have that I don't want. Obsession. I'm not obsessed with it. I think it's not healthy to just be single-mindedly focused on it. I'm not that way at all. But I realize that it gets me the things that I want for my family. I personally don't consider myself a big consumer, because I don't think consumption really makes you happy. I think experiences make you happy, and providing for your family is one of the greatest honors you can have.
Awesome. Last one. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want with money.
Wait a second. Things that I do have that I don't.
Something you do with money that you don't want to do with money.
Things that I do with money. I don't know. I'm going to pass on that one.
Okay.
I don't think
you handle your money well.
I think I'm good there.
Yeah. That's good. That's the CPA in you talking.
Yeah.
Cool. So is there anything before we close out today that you want to make sure people come away from this conversation with?
No, no, I think I'm always been optimistic, and I think that's a very good trait to have, is, believe in what you're doing, and follow that dream.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on today. And I love the stories you shared, and hopefully our listeners will get a lot out of it.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
And now it's time for our mindful moments about the interview that I had with Brannon and some of the life lessons that he taught us today that he's learned along the way. And just to start off, I think his mentorship was such an important piece of this discussion that oftentimes we don't realize, because of our own individual experiences, that other people don't know what we know. And if we don't take the time to actually stop and pause and help others or give people perspective or experience that they don't already have, they don't even know how to take the first step into a long-term goal that they have. And very early on, he realized that maybe the career path that his parents took wasn't for him. It wasn't the lifestyle that he wanted in the future. But had his grandfather not stepped in and actually given him perspective on what the business world was like, or had the entrepreneur that was a mentor during his high school years not stepped in and given him a flavor for what it's like to own a business, or when he worked at Elliott Davis and he had a client that saw something in him that was different and unique and actually paused in his day rather than continue to work, but take time with Brannon and give him advice on what next steps he could take, how could the door ever open for him? Now, Brannon and any of us, when we're given advice, have to be open to it and want it. But if someone doesn't actually take the time to give it to us, it's very hard for us to ever accomplish those things in our life. And when he actually was encouraged to branch out, I think it was really interesting as a second lesson in this that he didn't necessarily go in his career to the next level. He went sideways, if not sideways, but actually learning something completely new, which is really hard. That when we become an expert in something, we keep driving ourselves toward one direction, even if it's not the right direction for us, because we don't want to not be the expert once we really know what we're doing. But if we actually step back and look at a longer term vision, we know there's certain skills that we need in order to get there. And the skill that he was lacking was sales, which so many of us end up lacking this skill. And it becomes one of the most important skills in not only succeeding in your career, but also being a business owner. And so when he went back to learn how to be a salesperson, this helped him to be able to hit what he wanted to eventually do, was own a business. I loved his story that it was a complete fluke that he ended up opening a business where he buys and sells accounting firms, but all because he Googled the wrong name. However, that was another opening that, whether it's destiny or mistake, who knows, but that person that he called that was the wrong person actually opened up the door for him and gave him the time to learn about the business that he was doing, and which created his whole entire future going forward. So I think it's really important that one of the third points that he made was about there might have been stops along the way that he didn't enjoy as much as others, but there was no stop he couldn't have not taken. That all of those stops mattered in order to gain the experience to do the things that he wanted to do for his future and eventually be successful in business. Now, I asked him some questions about just the people he encounters that are selling businesses and are in this path of wanting to transition. And I thought he brought up a couple of really important points, was that you have to make sure that if you're ready to transition, that not only have you prepared the business to do it, that the business can run without you, but you also are truly ready to let it go, that you know what your next phase is, that you're not walking into the abyss, that you understand what that vision looks like so that you can be excited to make that next transition in your business and not actually get in the way of what you want. And the last really important lesson that I took away from this was in how he ran the business, of making sure that he takes time for himself, and that however he vacations, he knows as an example for the people that work for him. And that when he vacations, he doesn't take his cell phone or his computer. And he uses that as an example and a guideline for the people that he works with and works for him so that they do the same. And actually is vigilant about it when they start working on vacation. And I think this is really important, that we aren't all talk, that we are the example that we want to put out into the world, and to make sure that the people that work for us see us doing the things that we're preaching. And if we want them to enjoy their life, then we have to enjoy our life as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.